Ladies and gentlemen, this is a preview of a story which is going to be run on the Dateline NBC program, bringing you a preview of a shocking story out of Berkeley, California, home of the great world recognized UC Berkeley. This is a story of an alleged individual who claims to be a Hasidic rabbi from the Chabad Lubavitch movement. Chabad Lubavitch is an international religious organization. They have satellite synagogues across the country, and their leader is the late Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who passed away some 30 years ago. This story is about, this is a shocking story of a cancer patient named Levi Abulafia, a descendant of a golden chain of rabbis going back 10 generations in Svat. Well, this individual, Levi Abulafia, worked for an individual who claims the title of rabbi, but it remains to be seen and is widely believed that he does not have rabbinical ordination. Nevertheless, Yehuda Ferris of Chabad of the East Bay, who has lived in Berkeley for 45 years, since the early 80s, and is claimed to be leader of an organization, an affiliate of Chabad Lubavitch. The title of his organization is Chabad of the East Bay. Berkeley is in the East Bay area of Northern California Bay Area. Now, the shocking story begins with this late cancer patient who died 6 years ago this coming January 2026. He worked for Yehuda Ferris and his wife Miriam. They have various aliases. He's also known as Jay Ferris. She's also known as Marjorie Ferris. They have questionable Jewish roots because both of their parents were from Reform Judaism. Now, may not be much interest to the listeners here, but just to give you a brief background information, in Judaism, you're Jewish if your mother's Jewish, or if you convert, strict conversion by conservative or Orthodox denominations. Reform Judaism, which is not recognized as Jewish throughout the world, goes by the father. Well, both this man, Yehuda Ferris, and his wife were born of Reformed parents, but now they claim to be a Hasidic couple following the Hasidic Chabad Lubavitch movement, which is a missionary outfit all around the world. They go out and recruit Jews from anywhere they can find them and try to make them ultra-Orthodox. So, getting back to this story, Levi Yochanan Abulafia worked for this couple for nearly 30 years, and in 2014 he came down with cancer, and somehow or another, but it's highly suspicious, Yehuda Ferris became the trustee of the man's trust. It's under very suspicious circumstances, and after he became trustee of the trust, and after Levi Abulafia died in 2020, alleged Rabbi Yehuda Ferris and his attorney, alleged attorney William John Rogers, out of Petaluma, it's a common name, so I'll provide you the license number, the legal of the attorney, which is 154219. William John Rogers. William John Rogers allegedly wrote a trust for Levi Abulafia, but there's a problem. Levi Abulafia was in the hospital in a coma, and at the same time, the attorney, who claims to be an attorney 30 years but doesn't have a website, doesn't have a single review on the internet, doesn't have an employee, a single employee in his law firm, is a highly suspicious situation. Nevertheless, Mr. Rogers claims that Levi Abulafia wrote this trust 11 weeks before he died, and that he had visited him in person, but he didn't, according to the Levi Abulafia's son, who was his caregiver and was living with him. And The cancer patient himself was in the hospital 150 days, over 7 hospitalizations, and he was in a diagnosed severe liver coma the last 6 months of his life. And with this kind of coma, you can wake up at times, but you're essentially underwater until you die at this point. This is like the very late stages of liver cancer. And when 90% of people die in 6 months with liver cell cancer. It is known as one of the most lethal cancers on the face of the earth. So, the man who died survived 6 years with the help of world-renowned UCSF, which is recognized throughout the world as a center of excellency for liver disease. Nevertheless, moving right along, this is a short segment. I want to give you the whole story. The man who died has 3 surviving elderly Jewish, extremely low-income siblings. He has a younger brother and 2 sisters. The younger brother is just over retirement age, and the 2 sisters are slowly closing in on retirement age. The younger brother cared for him as caregiver for 6 years. The younger brother is in the medical field to some extent. His 2 younger sisters have no money, no savings, no properties, no professions, no degrees, and no skills. And he specifically wanted to provide for his 2 younger siblings, the man who passed away, Levi Yochanan Abalafia. However, now, 6 years later, they have received nothing. In the trust that was supposedly written 11 weeks before he died, while he's unconscious in a liver coma, the trust claims, and it's an irrevocable trust, it says, provide for my 3 siblings $100,000 to split 3 ways, and if they do not get it in 9 months, it shall become a lien on the property at 10% interest a year until paid in full. Ladies and gentlemen, this is in the public record. Anyone can look up this case. It's in Alameda County Probate Division of the Superior Court. It's available. The ePortal web domain is on the internet. You could access these records across the world if you have an internet connection. The case number you might want to write down, because there may be further victims, is RP, that's Richard Paul, RP 221-201-63. Now, this is a case of Jew-on-Jew financial abuse of the elderly. You have the trustee whose wife owns a $40 million real estate empire inherited by her parents. You have a cancer patient who worked for this couple for 30 years. The cancer patient fixed properties, repaired properties, restored properties. This couple had plenty of properties, so they were a match. However, when he got 6 months to live, every 6 months for 6 years, he wanted nothing more than to provide for his 3 elderly Jewish siblings. And Yehuda Ferris claims to be a rabbi in Berkeley for 45 years and may have other victims out there, and we recommend that you contact law enforcement if you've been a victim of Rabbi Yehuda Ferris of Chabad of the East Bay in Berkeley, California, or his wife. Contact law enforcement immediately. The story thus far is that the siblings have not received but 3 checks for $800 in the entire 6 years since their brother died. At the time that he died, he had $85,000 in cash and property worth $1 million. He owned half of a Berkeley house located at 1810 Grant Street, Berkeley, California, 94703. And he put his half of the house in this trust that supposedly was written on his deathbed. But here's the deal. His younger brother, the caregiver, discovered the real trust in the house later that gave them $250,000 in real estate to split 3 ways. The trustee and his attorney, by law, were supposed to inform the beneficiaries of a previous trust, because the law says you have 120 days to contest a trust. Well, they didn't tell him. And then the 120 days is up. Well, that's on appeal, but they don't have any attorney. And the other mockery of justice here is that the younger brother has found out through painstaking research and endless phone calls that there are no trust attorneys in California. Now, trust litigation attorneys, mind you, ladies and gentlemen, are the only attorneys that have the skill set to appear in probate court and to advocate and represent beneficiaries of trust. No other attorney, except a trust litigation attorney, even has the skill set to fight this kind of case. But here's the problem. Of all the trust litigation attorneys that do know how to fight inheritance cases, not a single one in California represents any beneficiary where the trust is less than $1.5 million or more dollars. And law enforcement can't do anything if the beneficiaries approach the police or district attorney and say, hey, here's our trust, we didn't get anything. They say it's a civil matter. And then when you go to the civil attorneys, they say, well, I don't know how to do that. You have to go to the trust litigation attorneys. And the trust litigation attorneys say, well, we don't take cases that small. So it's a horrible situation. They have managed to mark the man's younger brother with an eviction action, which will be on his name for 7 years, ruining his chances for employment, leasing, and purchasing property, because they threatened him with disinheritance if he didn't leave the property 3.5 years ago in the middle of the pandemic, and they didn't make him an offer either. And they sold the property to straw men for $82,000. So now the trust doesn't even own the $1 million in real estate. That's removed from the trust. The $85,000 that the man had, who passed away, has now been given to their attorney. So far he's received $57,000. And in mediation, they made an offer to the beneficiaries, $14,000 each, but you only have 2 hours to accept it. Then when the younger brother went to court and a trial date was set, the younger brother had to dismiss his case without prejudice to live to fight another day, because he did not have an attorney to represent him. So then they lied to the court and said that the brother had filed 30 lawsuits, but it was actually 4 lawsuits reprinted 30 times. So now the senile probate judge, elderly probate judge, slapped a vexatious litigant designation on the brother. So now he can't get any attorney to represent him because he's on that list. And when you're on that list, you can't represent yourself. So here it is. 3 elderly beneficiaries of a cancer patient's trust have been utterly and completely defrauded of every cent of their inheritance, while the culprit claims to be a holier-than-thou Hasidic rabbi, where he's stolen this money from elderly Jewish siblings, and the police won't do anything, and the attorneys won't do anything because there's not enough money in the case to fight. This is what is called the essence of financial abuse of the elderly, live in Berkeley, California. Back to you.